You're listening to Two Girls, One Crossword.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
That was my ice jingling for a nice little morning treat in my refresher. It's summertime, even though I have refreshers year round because I don't really drink coffee from Starbucks.
You can get refreshers from Dunks and Starbucks, just so you know, for anybody
True,
out
but
there.
The Dunkin' Donut refreshers, there's not like quality control. I mean, each place does it differently. In some places, they're really gross because they have too much green tea flavor. So I'm basically stuck only getting refreshers by us. But anyway, if
That's
anyone,
just her life. That's the burden she has to bear in this
if anyone
life.
works at corporate Dunkin' Donuts, let's talk for a second.
Let's talk about it. I really want to try a refresher now that I've seen Grace live through her refresher life.
It's refreshing.
I'm a coffee girl. Yeah.
I only like espresso, not to be annoying.
Oh my god.
But espresso,
which we did a topic on, if anybody is interested.
We did. And I don't like it, like, I don't drink it every day, but if I am going to drink coffee, that's what I drink. But that feels like crazy to buy from Starbucks to go. You know, that's like something that you get when you're like at the cafe, you're going to drink it there.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
Well, we have an espresso machine. Anytime you're over, you're more than happy to have an espresso. So.
Have you guys gotten the Cafe Bustelo pods yet?
Oh, no, we should.
That's the Cuban coffee stuff.
All
I think I'm going to, I feel like one day I'll get an espresso just to try that. Because I have the stovetop one, but it's like kind of a pain. I mean, that's why I would have it more if it was easier to make.
Sure.
But it's like to do the whole thing on the stove. I mean, I don't have time for that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
I need to like press a button.
No. Matt and I used to be very much like, oh, we're going to make our coffee every day. We do the French press, blah, 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 like the whole song and dance. And after a while, it became a chore. It literally became a chore. Like, no, I made the coffee yesterday. You make the coffee today. No, you make the coffee. Blah, 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 blah. And then like the cleaning out process is so annoying to me because you have to take the French press into pieces and blah, 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 clean it nice. We got an espresso. Cuts out the middleman, I'll tell you what. All you gotta do is fill water and you're done.
Right.
Well, I guess it technically is an additional middleman, but I like this middleman better. Or whatever.
I'll keep my eyes peeled on Facebook Marketplace.
Yes.
Well, shall we just... I was kind of like, how can I segue this to introducing us? But
well. Yes, we do need to introduce ourselves, but I think it is important for us to let our listeners know that we did another thing that we said that we were going to do.
Right.
I'm wondering if Grace, do you want to tell our listeners what we did?
Wait, hold on. Went to the Art Institute?
Oh, no. Well, we did do that. Right. We did go to the Art Institute, and we saw photos or paintings by the Toulouse-Lautrec, who painted the Moulin Rouge ladies. They were awesome. It was very cool. But we also played a game of Clue for the first time in a very long time.
Oh, it was so fun.
It was the most fun I've had in a long time, I think. And it was good to get competitive
that's why
with it.
I really feel like Clue is one of the best board games. We definitely need to play again. But my other problem is like people are going slow, you know?
I know.
It's like you got to be moving through this because
I know.
Especially when you're playing with that many people and everyone only has like 3 cards to start. It's, you know, takes a while to get through it.
I think because of the people there, you and I think, were the only ones who kind of like immediately got back into the swing of how to play Clue. Everybody else was like, wait a second, can I do this? And oh, I want to guess this. Is like, you can't guess the kitchen if you're in the study. Like things like that.
Come on.
Or like moving their pawns, like not using the tiles. It's just like, okay. Well, we had a lot of fun, actually. And I won, of course. But I was on Grace's tail the whole time, which allowed me to win. So I commend her.
Well, I'm not going to get into what happened, but it was very annoying because, you know, we figured out what it was at the same time, but Chelsea was like very close to the little cellar and it was her turn to go.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, I will say that the reason I won was because I was able to piggyback on some of the information Grace was acquiring. She would go like right
in
before
the trenches. I was like, I'm on the trail.
And I was like, she's on the trail. I better follow her.
It was fun though.
Amazing. Yeah, it was good.
And it took me a little bit to like remember what the strategy was. So I kind of like effed up the beginning of the game because I wasn't keeping track of certain things. So I'm excited to play again, with a
I
clear
know.
head and like
I
know from
know.
the get-go what I'm doing.
Well, now that
But
Hannah knows the secret, we're
Right.
gonna have to
do we have
a copy.
do only Michael and Kara have it?
I think
The
so.
board game?
We have to.
Okay,
We got to go to like there's got to be one at a thrift store somewhere.
for sure. I mean, I have one at home at my parents'. Maybe I'll bring it back.
Oh, not a bad idea.
Right.
Cool. Well, anyway, we do
yes.
cool things on this podcast.
We're mentioning that because Chelsea did Clue as a topic many moons ago.
It's true.
So we finally played. But yeah, this is Two Girls, One Crossword. I'm Grace Topinka.
I'm Chelsea Rowan. This is your favorite weekly Podword Crosscast, where we talk about all sorts of fun things like Clue, or what was the other one we just talked about? Oh, Toulouse-Lautrec, the painter who painted the things at the Moulin Rouge. Yeah, we're cool. We do cool things here.
Cool. Shall I get into our Pollapalooza from last week?
Let's do it.
I asked our Twitter followers to choose their fighter between Converse and Vans. I was going to put more, but I was like, I feel like Converse and Vans are like the two
They're the ones.
rivals.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know who else really fits in with their, because I feel like you're either one or the other, even though I've had both.
And it depends on the time period, like Etnies
Right.
wouldn't be in there now, but they would have been in like 10 years ago.
Right.
Or more than that. Oh my God.
There is a Converse. I want to get the Converse Run Star Hike, and I do want to get a pair of platform checkered Vans. That's like, it's on my list of potential shoes to buy. But the winner with 67% of the vote was Converse. And then Vans had the rest. So
I'm not
I
really
don't know.
surprised, I don't think.
I do feel like Converse is kind of untouchable in a way.
They've been around for longer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like Converse transcends different like subsets of like people groups, like you've got
Right. Converse is more than just
like,
skate. I mean, they were started for like basketball. That's like what people would wear as their athletic shoes, which is hilarious because they're so, I can't imagine like running in Converse.
I know. It's crazy. But yeah, I feel like it transcends just being like a skater boy aesthetic, whereas like Vans feels very skater boy.
Right.
Which is okay.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably why Converse won out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Converse, like, they've got a good look to them. Not that Vans don't, of course. I like both. I'd be
Converse
hard
are
pressed
just
to pick.
so classic, though.
They are. I think if I was to buy a pair right now of shoes, oh God, I think I would go Converse.
Yeah.
But I think it's just they're more, I don't know, more classic is not the right way to say it, but maybe sort of like adjacent to classic.
Yeah. I do feel like high top Converse are a pain in the freaking butt to put on, though. But they now make, not Converse, but you can get like really stretchy shoelaces. So when I get my new Run Star Hikes, which are high top Converse, I'm going to buy these like stretchy shoelaces because I basically only wear shoes that I can slip on. Like none of
100%.
My Adidas that I wear all the time, they haven't been untied in like years. I just like slip them on.
Exactly.
So I need shoes like that. Otherwise, I won't wear them. The same reason why I reach for my Chelsea Doc Martens instead of the lace-up ones all the time. Yeah. Because I'm like, oh, I just want to be able to slip right in and slip out, you know?
Matt has a pair like that too. He's got high top Nikes and he loves them, but it's like fighting a war to get them over his heel, And it's like, that's the way the world works.
Truly. Well, should we get into our heights and shites?
Yes. Will you start us off? I'm looking something up really quickly.
Sure. I did the Monday, June 19th New Yorker by Brooke Husick. 18 across. Catch on the bounce, ? Echolocate.
Cute.
I wish I
like
could
a little bat. I feel like you just have to keep trying.
Right. I don't know if it's in the cards for me. 20 across, way out there. The answer was unheard of. 23 across, cure-all. Elixir.
Elixir?
35 across, message that might end with over. And you think like, over walkie-talkies. But it was breakup text. Like, we're over.
If you were watching on YouTube, you would know that my mouth was agape there because I liked that clue. Sometimes my reactions are lost because they're not verbal.
Right. We need to have like what's it called when you have the captions that also describe like what's going on?
Exactly.
8 down, public image informally ? Profile pic.
Okay.
Do you remember when in MySpace era, it was called Your Default.
Yes.
New default.
Remember your top 8, top 10?
Yeah. I would always try and like, I think I would try and put funny people in there to like avoid,
You would.
hurting anyone.
My top 4 were locked. Okay.
Right.
They were
I did
locked.
actually, it was perfect because I had 3 best friends. And so I'd have my sister and then my 3 best friends, but it was like, what order do you put them in? I feel like I was like, I'm just going to put you guys in alphabetical order and call it a day.
Right.
That was such, if you don't,
The
if you,
drama.
right. If you weren't around for MySpace, essentially it was like, a social media profile, but you had a top 8 where you listed your top 8 friends, which is awful for people in middle school.
Yeah.
Cause like, you thought you were someone's like top 8 and then they took you out.
Exactly. That was devastating to be removed from somebody's top 8 or to like get bumped from like number 2 to 8. That was saying something.
Right. I'm glad that doesn't exist anymore. 39 down, pseudoscientific say, and the answer was woo woo.
Oh, I was like, I thought you said ooh woo. Like,
no.
Still good though. Still good. Who did that puzzle? Who was the constructor on that one?
Brooke Husick.
Brooke Husick. Every time I hear her name, I just think about the crossword tournament that I did with Hannah, where we literally answered, I think, one answer in her like puzzle that she had for that specific tournament, and I was like humbled.
Yeah,
graciously humbled.
Classic Brooke.
Classic. Okay, I'm gonna take us to the Friday, June 16th, New York Times by Natan Last and the JSA crossword class, which we see sometimes. They publish a crossword in the New York Times once a year, I believe. And this is what I was looking up.
It's
but essentially,
senior, I don't know if people know. I think it's like Jewish Senior Association, but it's basically like, seniors who take a crossword class and then like once a year they create one and it gets in the New York Times. And it's always really good.
I know, this was a very good puzzle.
I feel like because it's like so many different people, like from all different, walks of life contributing to it. So I feel like the clues are always really interesting.
It was fun. I was really excited that I clicked it and it said the JSA crossword class. I was like, oh, I'm definitely doing this one then. Anyway, so 13 across, Shell stations, ? Taco bars.
Nice.
24 down, faints from emotion. Plotzes, which I think is from Yiddish, and it's spelled Plotzes.
Amazing.
It's an incredible word. 31 across, spending excessive time reading negative news online. Doom scrolling, which I was, I try not to be ageist, but I'm like seeing something like doom scrolling with like a senior group. I'm like, oh, I'm glad that they know what doom scrolling is, 35 across, modern form of ostracization.
Ghosting? No.
Cancel culture, which is interesting.
Oh, right.
And then I'm just going to include this because I was going to do this as a topic and then I didn't, but I also just like seeing it in the puzzle. 36 across, popular vodka cocktails, and the answer is White Russians. And I actually did a topic on cocktails, so sometimes I'm like hesitant to do like, oh, let me cover White Russians. I already talked about cocktails overall, but sometimes if you talk about cocktails overall, you've got like this overarching theme and it's nice. You could talk about specific cocktails if you want, but sometimes specific cocktails like a White Russian could have a really interesting history.
I think that sometimes still could like do a deeper dive. I mean, we're in episode 167 now. Like sometimes it's really, you're doing the crosswords throughout the week and you're like, I got to find a topic in one of these that I haven't done before.
I'm like, I'm about to do a topic on the word the or something, like sometimes it gets hard, but also, have you ever had a White Russian?
No. It has milk in it, right?
Oh, yeah. I
would rather die. Sorry. Mixing milk with alcohol is like 2 of my least favorite drinks.
I agree. I've had one in the past, and a good one is like a milkshake. A bad one is like a cup of milk. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Noted.
Back to you.
I did the... Wait. I did the June 21st New Yorker by Paulo Pasco.
Oh, I didn't see that he had one.
Right, of course. Bunch of great clues. This is one that I didn't know. blank tribe of Florida, people who call themselves the only tribe in America who never signed a peace treaty. It's the Seminole tribe. I knew about the Seminole tribe. I didn't know that they called themselves the only tribe who never signed a peace treaty. That's
interesting. Cool. Yeah.
29 across, untitled blank game, video game in which players can honk to disturb villagers. It's the untitled goose game, which I played at Chelsea's house.
Which is one of my favorite.
It's so frustrating at first, but it is fun.
Yeah, it's one of those it's a good party game if you have like a group of people that you're kind of just like hanging, sitting on the couch, etc., etc., and you need something to do.
That's a game.
It's a good one.
5 down, 1 of 2 in a ghost costume. Eye hole.
Oh, I was like thinking of like a horse costume. You know, like how there would be 2 people in a horse costume. Okay.
27 down, beautiful setting, ? Tablescape.
Cute. It was like ring or something. Very good.
And then the last one, 29 down, cosigns on a bill, ? And the answer is goes Dutch.
I love that phrase, go Dutch.
Yeah. And
I don't know where that comes from.
I know. I was thinking like, maybe that'd be a good topic, actually.
We might look it up. Who knows? I'm going back to the New York Times, the Tuesday, June 20th New York Times by Amy Lucido. The theme was good. The revealer was 10 down. Absolutely lose it, or a hint to 6, 18, 21, and 24 down. And the answer was blow your top. So the first word of those answers to 6, 18, 21, and 24 down have to do with blowing, essentially. Anyway, stick with me here, folks. Stick with me. Okay, so 24 down. Tiny computer with a dessert-inspired name. Raspberry Pi, which I had never heard of as a computer, but you could blow a raspberry. 18 down. Poppable packing material. Bubble wrap, which is a fun answer. 6 down, political campaign made up of a series of short appearances, which I didn't realize there was a name for this. Whistle stop tour, so you can blow a whistle. And then 21 down, 1948 musical based on The Taming of the Shrew, and the answer is Kiss Me, Kate. You can blow a kiss. Very cute, right?
Very cute.
I also liked from this puzzle, 13 across, anxiety-based reason to attend a party in modern lingo, and the answer is FOMO. I rarely get FOMO, like truly rarely. I'm mostly like at the event and I'm like fear of not being home. Oh, that's me. This was funny. 20 across, person who can't be the victim of a pickpocket. A nudist. They cannot be pickpocketed. Speaking of pickpockets, have you seen the Attenzione, pickpocket on TikTok? No. Have you seen those? Oh my God, this account is going viral. There's a woman who becomes familiar with the various pickpocketers it looks like they're in Venice. And whenever she sees them around American tourists or just tourists in general or in busy crowded areas, we'll go around, Attenzione, pickpocket, and like just reveal them. It is hilarious. I hope you start seeing them now.
Be careful though.
I know. And it's interesting because all these pickpockets are like young women, just like normal millennial looking women.
Like the best, the best cover up.
Exactly. Also from this puzzle, shout out to your fiance, because I think this is related. 5 down, purplish fruit used in smoothies. And the answer is acai, which is normal to see in a crossword. But the reason I'm bringing this up related to your fiance is because she sent me a TikTok the other night, specifically about the word acai and how if you mispronounce words like acai and you get made fun of it, there is an app for that so that you can practice or like learn how to say words that you mostly only ever read. And the app is called Youglish, Youglish. But essentially, you type the word into this little platform and it scans YouTube transcripts to find that word, so you can watch multiple YouTubes where people are actually saying the word aloud instead of having to use those crappy and sometimes
but sometimes I feel like they're really
predatory.
Wrong. Like the Google one. Sometimes like that's not how you pronounce that. Like
I know. Anyway, so apparently there's this app for that. So Youglish, I felt like that's really helpful for Grace and I because there's tons of words that we struggle to pronounce.
Yeah, she showed it to me too. Don't worry. She was like, I think you and Chelsea could use this. I was like, shut up.
Oh my, I know we could.
I'd like to see you have a podcast and pronounce everything correctly.
Yeah,
Okay.
honestly. Okay.
There are some
Anyway.
words that's like, you only ever read them. How am
It's
I
true.
supposed to know how it's pronounced?
It's true. Like,
Anyway.
I know. Anyway, that's what I have from that puzzle.
Okay, let's see. Well, I'll end with the Tuesday, June 20th New Yorker by Natan Last. 30 across, Thingamabob, Doohickey.
Cute.
37 across, whispered question when a mystery woman enters the room, perhaps. Who is she?
Who is she?
42 across, does numbers as a number, question mark. And it's charts, like a musical number.
Oh, I was like, is this an accountant thing?
No. 2 down, shag under the table, maybe. Area rug.
I love a shag rug.
And then
I'll just say
47 down, animal known for its writing reflex, which is a cat. They always land on their feet, supposedly.
Oh, writing, like R-I-G-H-T, not
Right.
W-R-I. Aha, very good. I only have 3 more from the Wednesday, June 21st New York Times by Jimmy Peniston. These are just cute, so I had to bring them up. 19 across, Neptune for 1. And the answer was Sea God, which is hilarious because my dog's name is Neptune, but it's even better. It gets better because right next to that answer, right next to it in the puzzle was 21 across, Honey and Sugar for 2. And the answer was pet names.
Cute.
And I was like, I'm dead. I know that they meant honey and sugar, like, something you might call like your lover, right? But
right.
my dog's
I
name
think
is
it was
Neptune. And
a
it's
message to you specifically.
right. Isn't that cute? I was like, I have to talk about this. I also liked 54 across, confession from someone who had an ace up the sleeve. I cheated.
Drama.
Cute. Drama. Anyway, that's everything that I have.
Well, shall I flip the coin then?
I think we should flip the coin to get into our topics. I'm flipping the coin now.
Sorry, I took a nice long sip of my refresher during the coin flip.
You're going to need it because you're first. It's tails, kid.
Me? Okay, let me get set up here. My topic comes from the Sunday Washington Post puzzle from June 18th by Evan Bernholz.
Evan making an appearance. Hello.
Classic Evan. 52 down. Historical Czech region near Moravia. Speaking of Yuglish.
Hold on.
It's Bohemia.
Bohemia. I was wondering. I'm like, it's Moldova, Bohemia. Okay.
So I'm
Very
going to
good.
talk about Bohemianism, as we know it, like boho chic,
Yes.
heavy bohem, and then, but where it actually comes from, because Bohemia is in fact a region in Czech. And are they related? Well, kind of, but it's kind of like more of a mistake, the reason why they're associated. But first, I'm going to talk about the actual region in Czech Republic.
Let's do it. I'm in for it.
Well, okay. First, the term Bohemian in the West refers to a person who lives an unconventional lifestyle, often with few permanent ties involving musical, artistic, or literary pursuits. But like the clue said, Bohemia is also a historical region of Czech Republic. So, how do we get that term? The beginning information is from an article on ancientorigins.net called "The Kingdom of Bohemia: European Jewel in the Heritage of Czechs" by Alexa Vukovic.
Okay.
Alexa says that the Kingdom of Bohemia was, quote, a powerful kingdom that lasted for more than 7 centuries that shaped the future and the identity of the Czech people and made them into one of the most prominent members of the diverse Slavic family tree, giving them a strong and indivisible heritage. And I will say that any Czech people out there who are maybe listening, yes, my last name is Czech. And if you go to Czech Republic, you will see, well, my last name is Topinka, but you'll see Topinky on the menu. It's like a little toast dish. So yes,
I didn't know that about you.
One of my AIM screen names was Lil Toast.
That is freaking cute.
Yeah.
Is that your dad's side?
Yeah.
It must be, obviously. But Matt's family is Slovak. So
the other our
the other
friendly neighbors.
Other half. Yeah, the other half. Yeah.
Okay, so today Bohemia is the largest region of Czech Republic, so 6.5 million out of the 10.5 million people who live in Czech Republic. 6.5 million live in Bohemia, so it is like the largest region.
Wow. Okay.
In Czech Republic, the name most likely came from the Celtic tribe Boii, Boii, that settled in the area. So basically, this Celtic tribe settled in the area, called it Bohemia. They were kicked out during the Gallic Wars of Julius Caesar, leaving it open for Germanic tribes to move in. This time in history, tribes were kind of settling and then moving, whatever. So a lot of different people came through Bohemia. By the 6th century, Slavs had established themselves as the dominant ethno-linguistic group in much of Central and Eastern Europe, including Bohemia. And because of its central location, it kind of became one of the most powerful regions among the Slavic tribes. Fast forward to 14th century, during the Luxembourg dynasty, Charles of Luxembourg, who was the king of Bohemia, became Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV. He founded the University of Prague, which led to Prague becoming the capital of the empire and also the center of intellectual and artistic activity in Central Europe. So Bohemia was really like this center for education and art, in the Slavic or in Central Europe. Fast forward to the 15th century, and Bohemia was questioning the Holy Roman Empire and the Catholic.
As one does.
Yeah, and the Catholic Church. Because at this point they were taken over, or they were like mostly ruled by the Germans, who were Catholic, versus like the people to the north of them were more just other Christian. But this is a very truncated version of history.
It's okay.
Hussite wars went on for years and eventually led to religious freedom in the area, relative, of course, to the time, and less power of the Catholic Church in the region. So this was kind of the beginnings of like the Protestant movement.
Okay, the Protestants have arrived.
Right. So fast forward to the 17th century, the Catholic Church got their revenge once again when the Habsburgs controlled Bohemia and nationalism and Protestantism were once again suppressed.
Right.
The Czechs and Slovaks came together after World War I against the Habsburgs and formed the Republic of Czechoslovakia. So they were originally two separate countries, but they were both being, controlled by the Habsburgs. That kind of brought them together, and so they created Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia wouldn't be fully free from German control until after World War II. At this time, the Czech language, like once the Germans were kind of kicked out, the Czech language went through an intense period of national revival because they had been dominated by German like for 2 centuries.
Yeah.
So there was like this huge revival of, Czech pride and like, just original Czech culture and language. So they went through like a huge strengthening of Czech national identity and rekindling their connection with the glorious past of Kingdom of Bohemia.
Okay.
In 1993, Czech and Slovakia peacefully uncoupled in the Velvet Divorce. So, not to get too into why they broke up, but they were just two different like ethnic groups basically, and they came together at a point where, they needed each other, but then it became kind of hard for, like, they just realized that it would be better if they just separated and did their own thing again.
Yeah, their kids were, like, growing up, and they needed, they were happy that mom and dad brought them into this world, but it was time for mom and dad to do something for themselves for once. Right.
So it was a, peaceful breakup.
Very well. Very good.
That's a very brief history of Bohemia
I love it.
And the Czech Republic.
I think that's probably more history on that than the average American will ever hear in their life. So thank you for that.
So now let's go over to New York in 1917. A group of artists climbed to the top of Washington Square Arch, started a bonfire, and declared that Greenwich Village had seceded from America, forming the independent Republic of Bohemia. So
this is familiar to me. Okay.
Right. So sure, the Kingdom of Bohemia was progressive for its time. They had like one of the first universities in the region, and, they fought for like religious freedom. But how did the, Bohemia in Czech Republic make its way over to America in this like Bohemian lifestyle? Well,
tell me.
They stopped in France, of course. Paris, to be exact.
We're in Paris.
Once again, we're back in Paris. So let's rewind to like 1500 years ago. The Romani people were uprooted from their homes in northwest India, and they began a migratory existence, which lasted for centuries. So yeah, Romani people are originally from India, but then the things I read, I was like, not sure why they got kicked out, and then they kind of, started this. They just moved around from place to place, but they often weren't welcome wherever they went. They were always labeled as outsiders,
They still are in a lot of ways, which is bananas. Yeah.
In the 15th century, they found a brief respite in the kingdom of Bohemia. So they were given a letter of protection and other privileges, which allowed them to like settle down for a bit in Bohemia. And I couldn't I was trying to figure out why they did this. The only thing I could like potentially put together was Bohemia was going through a period of like religious freedom and not wanting the Catholic Church to have so much power over them. So maybe they were like, oh, anyone is like welcome to come here and,
sure,
do whatever they want to do. So they did extend this letter of protection to the Romani people. So they lived in Kingdom of Bohemia for a while. Then in the 1800s, the Romani people migrated to France, and the French people were like, where'd you come from? And they were, they came from Bohemia, even though they're not really from Bohemia, they're from India.
Yeah.
But at that point, that was like the last place maybe they had been before going to France. So
sure.
The French just referred to them as like Bohemians or like Bohème, whatever. It was often
La vie bohème. Sorry.
Right. It was often a pejorative term used to describe them. They were labeled as outsiders, and they lived in their neighborhoods were often like very low rent and low cost of living. So a lot of artists in Paris started living in Romani neighborhoods. And so that's where like the term Bohemianism emerged. It's like these people who it was associated with the Romani people at first because the French thought that they were from Bohemia, but then it just got associated with anyone who kind of lived like an unconventional, transient life and started, referring more to people who were like artists.
Sure.
Struggling artists.
Got it.
And yes, Bohemians were known for drinking absinthe, which if you want to listen to the absinthe episode, listen to episode 138, Little Green Chokehold. Talk about absinthe there.
Ooh.
The first usage of the term Bohemianism in its current meaning was by French journalist Félix Piat in 1834 in an article called Les Artistes. He derogatorily described this personality type as, quote, alien and bizarre, outside the law, beyond the reaches of society. They are the Bohemians of today.
Oh, I love that.
The term was commonplace in the 1850s when Henry Murger began publishing and staging a series of stories called La Vie de Bohème, which would eventually become the world-known Puccini opera, La Bohème. What's the plot of this opera? This is from operanorth.co. Let me know if it sounds familiar. Four struggling bohemians, a poet, a painter, a musician, and a philosopher, are living together in Paris, when one freezing Christmas Eve, their lives are changed forever. A girl named Mimi knocks on their door looking for a candlelight, and she and Rodolfo fall in love. However, the rush of love at first sight soon gives way to something much darker. It becomes clear that Mimi is desperately ill and that Rodolfo, in his poverty, cannot provide for her. Our bohemians try to find their way, but are soon sharply awoken to the harsh realities of life.
I had no idea that that's what Rent was based off of.
Right. And like, if you look at the names, I mean, Rodolfo is Roger. There's like a Colin, a French version or Italian version of Collins. So yes, that is what Rent is based off. One of the songs from the opera is called They Call Me Mimi, which is the last line of Light My Candle from Rent for all you, Rent fans
Rent
out
heads,
there.
Yeah.
But
what?
Yeah, very interesting.
Okay. Seriously, yeah.
Okay, so Bohemianism spread outside of France. It went to England. The lifestyle was popularized in William Makepeace Thackeray's novel Vanity Fair, which was published in 1848. And in the 1850s, aesthetic bohemians began arriving in the United States. A lot of them were in the Greenwich neighborhood in New York City. And in 1857, a group of 15 to 20 young cultured journalists flourished as self-described bohemians. So these were like specifically journalists. They called themselves bohemians. They would gather at a German bar on Broadway called Pfaff's Beer Cellar, which doesn't exist anymore. They like reopened one a couple of years ago, but it closed down. But one of the most well-known members of this group was Walt Whitman, and they also considered Edgar Allan Poe a bohemian before his time. He was already dead at this point. Similar journalist groups around the country, like there were similar journalist groups around the country that called themselves bohemians, but they were all broken up during the American Civil War because they were reporters and they were sent to cover on the conflict. So they were all kind of split apart, but correspondents began to take up the title bohemian, and it soon became synonymous with newspaper writer. So like when it first came to the States, it was very much like a journalist type thing.
Okay, interesting.
I can't get too much into this because it's like very complicated. There's whole books written on this, but the beginning of bohemianism in the US was very intertwined with the Civil War, with what was going on in the South, because Bohemians were not only into the arts, but they were also into like political radicalism and social revolution. After the war...
Kind of checks out with my understanding of it, yeah.
Right. After the war, bohemianism lived on. In the early 1900s, Greenwich was the hub for struggling artists, but then in 1919, a subway extension brought Greenwich Village within a 10-minute train ride of Wall Street, dramatically raising the rent cost. So in 1920, a lot of bohemians went to Paris and Washington, D.C., although they still existed in New York, but that's why there's a lot of like American artists in Paris in like the 1920s.
Sure.
Okay, this is from the Bohemian Manifesto, A Field Guide to Living on the Edge by author Lauren Stover. Says that there are 5 main styles of bohemians. There's beat, which are drifters, but non-materialist and art-focused.
Think of like Kerouac.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's the dandy, who has no money, but they try to appear as if they do have money by buying and displaying expensive or rare items. There is the G-slur, which is the expatriate types. They create their own ideal of nirvana wherever they go, which, you know, is another issue. But basically people who like, you know, are migratory. There's Zen, who are post-beat, but they instead of focusing on art, they focus more on spirituality. And then there's Nouveau, which are bohemians that are rich who attempt to join the traditional bohemianism with contemporary culture. So that leads me to the final thing I'm going to talk about, the term bobos or bourgeois bohemian. That's a hard word for me to say. Okay. So the term was introduced by cultural commentator David Brooks to describe the 1990s descendants of the yuppies in his book Bobos in Paradise that came out in 2000. Brooks describes bobos as highly educated folk who have one foot in the bohemian world of creativity and another foot in the bourgeois realm of ambition and worldly success. So Brooks talks about how historically it was the bohemians against the, you know, bourgeois, but over time, things that once belonged to counterculture bohemians like veganism, henna hair dye, basmati rice, etc. had been adopted over by the bourgeois.
Sounds, yeah.
So I'm going to end with this quote. Quote, they've taken all the things that were from the 60s of interest to teenagers, like free love and nudity, and gotten rid of them, and kept all the things that are of interest to middle-aged hypochondriacs, like whole grains and fancy rice.
Yeah.
So I think that movie that came out, there's like that movie that came out with how Rent was written with Andrew Garfield. I think it explores this more, especially Bobos and stuff.
Interesting.
But yeah, that's bohemianism. I mean, it's very broad. I was like, I tried to look for a list of like famous bohemians, but it was like to create a list of all the bohemians would be so tedious because it was like any artist, like you know,
I get it
during that time. But yeah,
that was something I was definitely
movement.
interested in. I was interested in this in high school because I was obsessed with like Jack Kerouac, like obsessed with him, Allen Ginsberg, Walt Whitman, like the whole gamut. I am no longer on that train, but God, it's easy to feel like that's something you could buy into.
Right.
You know?
Well, you think of like how popular boho chic was for a while,
yeah.
But it was like very like Anthropology is obscenely expensive, but they're like boho is their There's, you know, all these think pieces about how like you can't be bohemian if you like part of being bohemian is like living in poverty. You know, because you're not supposed to care about materialistic things.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. The whole thing is kind of like messed up in a way too, because the whole term is based on something that's not even like a
misnomer of a group of people,
Romani people. But
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's always been that like artists who are able to be struggling artists because they are wealthy, like the woman who invented the bra, that she went to Paris and was hanging out with all these artists drinking absinthe and stuff and like doing all this crazy stuff, but she was like filthy rich. So yeah, she could like, you know, F off and just hang out.
Yep, we could talk about that for a long time, but I feel like Paris is a hub for that particular type of social environment happening in multiple eras throughout time.
Yeah.
When in doubt, just go back to Paris. And we've always said that.
Mm-hmm.
We've always
It
said that.
all starts in Paris. But yeah, that's Bohemia.
Ooh, thank you for doing Bohemia. I liked that topic.
Makes me want to watch Rent again.
We should watch it. I haven't seen it since college, Grace.
We need to watch Rent and we need to watch Titanic.
I know. Alex texted me last night and asked me to watch it with you. So.
Right, because I was like, we should watch Titanic. She's like, I don't want to watch that. I'm like, no one wants to watch that. Now is like times of the essence now. It's topical again.
It is topical with James Cameron in the news. Everybody's talking. Yeah.
I forgot from your Challenger topic how like he's one of the leading like ocean exploration
people. It's wild. It's wild. Yeah. When worlds collide, am I right?
Right.
My topic comes from the Friday, June 16th New York Times by Natan Last and the JASA crossword class 28 down. Typesetting consideration. And the answer is font.
Ooh.
I'm going to start with a quote from an article on Font Fabric titled Type Origins, History and Evolution of Type by Konstantin Kirilov and Nikolai Petrozenko. Quote, although we tend to think of typography as a relatively modern invention, the practice of imprinting symbols into soft or malleable surfaces has been around for thousands of years. We can find examples in ancient Mesopotamia, where clay cylinder seals were engraved with financial transactions, official signatures, and even protection devices. While in essence you can call any letter or symbol written by humans typography, we mostly associate the word with its contemporary definition, which traces its roots to 1450 and Johannes Gutenberg's introduction of the metal movable type printing press. End quote. So, we're talking about typography today. And this is an interesting topic for a couple reasons. Partially because it seems like it could be very straightforward, but I think typography is a type of science that you need like a design degree to fully understand. So we're going to have to stick together with each other here today. We're going to hold hands and just trust the process. Before we get into the history, I want to talk briefly about some typography classifications because it'll help us understand terms later on. And each of these types of classifications have subsets and additional classifications and so on and so forth. And we can't get into all of them. We will for some, but let's just get started. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about 5 basic typeface classifications. There are more of these depending on which system that you follow, but I just wanted to focus on these. The first is calligraphic or calligraphic typeface. Calligraphic typefaces are inspired by the art of calligraphy, so they look like calligraphy. The second is black letter typeface. These typefaces are a script style of calligraphy and are highly ornamental. So think of calligraphy, but more script, like cursive-ish, sort of. An example of this is the New York Times logo. That is black letter typeface.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Then we have serif typeface. I think a lot of people have heard serif or sans serif, so serif. These are typefaces that include semi-structural details on many of the letters, and some people call these little structures feet. So when you look at a serif typeface, it has, like the letter E, it's not just 3 lines that kind of come off the stem. It's 3 lines, and then the top line has like a little foot at the end, and the bottom line has a little foot at the end. That's what a serif is, that little ornamentation. So some subsets of serif typefaces. We've got old style, which is characterized by a low contrast in stroke weight and angled serifs. So think of Garamond. Actually, it might be a good idea if you have your phone open or if you're at work listening to us, if you want to pull open a Word document when I talk to you about some of these fonts, you can look at them or you can Google them as I'm talking about them. It might be easier for you to like conceptualize them, but old style serif font would be like Garamond. Then we have transitional serif typeface, which have a more vertical axis and sharper serifs. So think of the Baskerville font for that. Then we have a modern serif typeface, which they have straight serifs and are on a totally vertical axis. Think of the Bodoni font. And then we have the Egyptian serif, or also known as the slab serif, which are typefaces that have heavy serifs and were used for decorative purposes in headlines because the heavy serifs basically made them illegible the smaller you printed them. So, Egyptian or slab serifs are used for big prints, like posters. Think of Rockwell, which is like a really heavy set serif font. Then we have sans serif. So a sans serif is a typeface that doesn't have any serifs on it. So, those little feet we talked about, these typefaces, I should say, do not have the feet. A humanist sans serif typeface includes proportions that are modeled on old style typefaces. So we just talked about old style serif. Now imagine old style serifs like Garamond without their feet. That is what a humanist sans serif typeface is. Like Gill's Sans, that's the font you can look up if you're interested, if you're on Google right now. Then we have transitional sans serifs, which are the same thing as a transitional serif, except they don't have feet. Think of Helvetica. Then we have geometric sans serifs, which are based on geometric forms. In some cases, lowercase letters like the letter O might have perfect geometric forms. Think of the typeface Futura. Then we have script typefaces. I keep messing this up. You'll have to bear with me. Anybody that's a design person, and I keep saying font, please forgive me. We'll talk about the difference between typeface and font in a second. So a script typeface are based on like flexible brush or pen strokes, and they basically look like handwriting. Okay. So now, font versus typeface. Comic Sans is, I think it's called decorative. So it would be under the decorative classification, which I didn't include here. But like decorative classifications are the ones that are like, it's like a Western typeface or like the big bubbly ones or something like Comic Sans. So now we're going to talk about font versus typeface, because I kept calling all of these things fonts, which is not the case. They are typefaces. Apparently, the font versus typeface debate is a huge thing. It's not really a debate, but it's one of those like, actually moments that people will give you.
According to my research.
So keep this in mind for the next time you're at a party or you're in your next design meeting and you want to impress your typography designers.
If you want to be annoying, then.
Or if you want to be just really effing annoying. I actually have this here. I'll give you a tip to look cool or just annoying is what I wrote. Okay, so fonts and typefaces are two different things, sort of. It's easiest to explain with an example. So Helvetica is often referred to as a font, and this is because when you go into Microsoft Word and you click the font drop down, or if you're downloading a font from online, a font, quote unquote, when you add it to your database on your computer, you add it through like the font window, right? So this can like cause some confusion. That's why things are often called fonts when they're actually typefaces. So Helvetica is often referred to as a font, but it's actually a typeface. It's a typeface because it is a complete set of sans serif characters with a common design ethos. So the Helvetica typeface includes every single letter in every single weight, every single size, so on and so forth. Okay? At the same time, a typeface, the Helvetica typeface included, comprises of a collection of fonts, which each of them have a specific weight, style, and size, for example. For example, Helvetica Regular in literally any size is considered a font.
Okay.
You could think of the typeface as the whole family of fonts.
I see. So like, because there's Helvetica Bold.
Exactly. That's a font.
I see.
Exactly.
Okay. Ooh, that will be fun to be annoying with. Be like,
exactly.
Oh, Helvetica's your favorite font? Isn't that a typeface?
We'll be unstoppable. We're literally about to be unstoppable. Okay. So there are a ton more like font classifications and like more info on the typeface versus font discussion, but we're going to talk about the history of typefaces. Typography and printing as we know it began in the 11th century in China during the Song Dynasty. Invented by Bi Sheng between 1039 and 1048 when he created movable type using porcelain. So he using the entire Chinese alphabet and the character system, he made all of these like basically little stamps. These are kind of like stamps. That's the best way we can, describe them, of all of the different characters, and you could set them into this thing and print papers with them. But if you are not familiar with like Asian alphabets, they have thousands and thousands of characters. It's truly insane how many characters that they have. So you can imagine how complicated it was to print in Chinese at this time, just based on the sheer volume of characters that they had, versus like the Roman alphabet, like A through Z. That's all we have in English, right? Okay, so he was using porcelain. It was later discovered that wood was easier to replace, and all you need to do was quickly carve a new letter or character. So they moved into wood. But then metal movable type was invented around 1230 in Korea. And metal proved to be a much more hard-wearing material than previous materials used, so people started using metal. Independent of this, in Europe, the Romans developed the chiseled Roman square capital system known simply as Capitalis Monumentalis, which was essentially an ancient form of Roman writing and the basis for today's modern capital letters. So the capital letters that we have come from this Romanus or Capitalis Monumentalis. Around the 1st century BC, Roman inscriptions changed into using this basically the serif font, this serif capital font. And this change spread rapidly due in part to the huge geographic spread of the Roman Empire, and it set the stage for the entire development of Western type structure. So you have these two things happening separate of each other that eventually are going to inform the invention of the printing press and typeface as we know it. Moving forward, okay. Before the invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid-15th century, and before the movable typefaces in Asia, books were written by hand. Generally, these books were reserved for the elite, though there were some growing literacy in the middle class, which increased the demand for books. But as you can imagine, writing books by hand was a long and arduous process. Gutenberg realized that being able to mass produce books quickly and cheaply was a lucrative process. Let's do it. So he was inspired by the movable type used in Asia, and there was also a screw type press that was used by farmers in Europe. Anyway, so he began to devise an idea for the first printing press. He was a goldsmith, so he was able to create durable letter blocks that could be used over and over again. And while arranging the letters for a page could take an entire day, the page could then be printed as many times as necessary from that single day's work. So it made the process very, very quick. Gutenberg's letter forms were based on the black letter calligraphy that was used to write manuscript. We talked about black letter earlier, okay? The black letter typefaces are a script style of calligraphy and can be highly ornamental. So think of the New York Times logo, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine every book was being printed in a typeface that looked like that.
Yeah.
Okay. The downside of this typeface was that it limited the amount of text that could fit on a single page, creating longer books that required more time to set up. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was faster, but now the books were longer, blah, blah, blah. We're wasting resources. So much ink was being used, blah. So much paper was being used. Black letter typefaces, so that New York Times look, was the original standard for printing presses. This is because they mimicked the handwriting at the time. That's what people's handwriting looked like.
Right.
But like I said, first of all, that's bananas.
Yeah.
To me. That's
it's like, how long did it take you to write anything? It's like when SpongeBob writes the to begin his story.
It's like you just think, right, and they're like, oh, this is the classic way to do it. I'm like, just speed it up,
Yeah,
just speed it up.
Let's simplify things a little bit. You don't have to have 9 swirls on your tea,
Exactly. Like I said, downside to this was that it took up a considerable amount of space on the page. So in 1470, a man named Nicholas Jensen realized that by simplifying these black letter forms, printers would be able to fit more text on a page. This meant shorter books and faster setup times. He created the first ever Roman typeface. We didn't talk about Roman classifications earlier, but it falls under the serif classification. Roman typefaces were originally based on this Roman Capitalis Monumentalis from Rome, okay? Mm-hmm. So his Roman type is the basis for multiple modern fonts, including Centaur, created by Bruce Rogers in 1914, and the Adobe Jensen, which was created by Robert Slimbach in 1996. While Jensen's Roman type saved space on the page, others were trying to save even more space to create more efficiency of book printing. In 1501, Aldus Manutius and Francesco Griffo created the first italic typeface, which allowed even more text to fit on the page because everything was slanted. Mm-hmm. So you had more space to use. And while this was initially invented to save space, italics is still used today for emphasis of text, right?
Right.
However, efficiency and space were not the only typographic challenges tackled by the first type designers. Can you imagine the most important one? We kind of talked about it a little bit with the Rockwell.
Legibility?
Font. Yes, readability. So readability of early typefaces was not ideal, especially the italic typefaces favored for saving space. So in 1734, William Caslin created a new typeface style that included more contrast between strokes in each letter form. It's now referred to the old style type. These typefaces made letter forms more distinguishable from one another at a glance, improving readability. We talked about old style earlier. These were characterized by low contrast in stroke weight and angled serifs. So this is Garamond. If you have your Word document open, this was like a Garamond typeface. I was going to say font typeface.
They're going to come after you.
They're coming from, I feel them. They're just like breathing on my neck right now. In 1757, John Baskerville created the transitional typefaces. That name might sound familiar to you because he is, in fact, the inventor of the Baskerville font. Anyway, so John Baskerville created transitional typefaces. We also talked about transitional earlier. These have more vertical axes and sharper serifs like the Baskerville font. With Baskerville's invention of transitional typefaces, printers began to see improvements to type, ink, the printing presses, etc. But his typeface was blacker than that of his contemporaries and therefore criticized due to the thickness of its strokes, the drama. One of his critics even said his typeface would, quote, be responsible for blinding the nation, end quote. I mean, honestly.
Everyone has haters.
They had nothing else to talk about but the Baskerville font back in the 1700s. Nevertheless, one of the dear friends of the podcast, Benny Franks, was a huge fan
classic
of the Baskerville typeface. Okay? Anyway, so while Baskerville's typeface was a commercial failure, it was eventually revived in the 20th century, and he has since been hailed as, quote, the greatest printer England has ever produced, end quote. Isn't that how it always happens? Just remember, folks, if everybody hates you now, they might love you later. Well, you'll be dead, but...
Goes to show, I mean, there's so many times in our, like, in different topics where it's like, everyone hated this, and now it's, like, super popular or well-known. Sometimes it happens after you die, though, so... We'll see. Maybe once we die, this podcast will really take off.
Hopefully, and it can pay for the generations of family that we have to come.
Right. It's like, I'm leaving everything to my cat and my will.
Right, exactly. Okay, so in 1815, the first ever Egyptian typeface became commercially available. Egyptian, also known as slab serif, are typefaces that have heavy serifs and were used for decorative purposes in headlines because, you know, like I said before, the heavier the serif, when the font is smaller, it makes it harder to read. The Rockwell font is an example of this. The first style of slab serif, the typeface was called Antique, and it was designed by Vincent Figgins. These typefaces were more attention-grabbing than traditional serifs. The primary characteristic of slab serif typefaces was the lack of curvature on the serif. So if you think of the Rockwell font, it's very linear and blocky and thick, and just kind of, it's thick and blocky. Slab serifs quickly grew in popularity in the early 19th century alongside the rise of printed advertising. Some slab serifs were developed specifically to be used at larger sizes for printed matters like posters. I think of like Uncle Sam Wants You or whatever. Like I think of those types of posters, and Rockwell immediately comes to mind. I don't know if that's actually the font that they used, but that's kind of like what I imagine. Right. Interestingly enough, advertising also brought about the first sans serif typeface in 1816. Developed by William Caslin IV, the 2 lines English Egyptian, also known as Caslon Egyptian, was an accessible typeface at the time. It was a very successful typeface and was used extensively in advertisements and printed material from the early 19th century. Sans serif typefaces were also likely a direct product of the, quote, Egypt mania that took place in the West during the 1800s, where essentially Western cultures became obsessed with Egypt. I feel like we talked about, there's a woman we talked about on the podcast that was obsessed with Egypt, or maybe I just saw it in a film recently. I can't remember, but like during the 1800s, people were obsessed with Egypt, and it influenced art and whatever in Paris and beyond. Anyway, okay, so during this Egypt Egyptomania. Typography took design cues from ancient Egypt and their art and their block lettering style, where serifs were either minimal or entirely missing. And so the next so that's kind of like how sans serif kind of started, infiltrating the typeface community. But the next significant development in sans serif type came 100 years later with the design of Edward Johnson's iconic typeface that is used for the London Underground, which is still used today, interestingly enough. Mind the gap. So the 20th century brought more important developments to the typeface history. The first full-time type designer was a guy named Frederick Gowdy, who got his start in the 1920s. He created iconic fonts that are still in use, including Copperplate Gothic and Gowdy Old Style, based on Jensen's Old Style typefaces. Then in 1957, Max Madinger designed Helvetica, which is arguably the most iconic typeface from the 20th century. Other minimalist typefaces were developed in the 20th century, including Futura, developed by Paul Renner, and Optima, developed by Hermann Zapf. All of these fonts are like super famous, and one of the things that I'm taking away from this is that I didn't realize that these fonts had designers, or that anybody cared this much. But apparently,
Yes.
I feel like I should know this. We work with design companies, and designers are insane. And I say that with love. It's okay to be insane about the things that you're passionate about. But it was still surprising to me that it's like, oh yeah, this font was designed by this person. This font was designed by this person. I was just like, wow, it really is much more. It's deeper than I thought it was. Yes, it's an art. It's an art in a way that I couldn't comprehend until I started doing this topic. The first digital typeface, Digi Grotesque, was designed by Rudolf Hell. What a name! In 1968.
That is a great last name.
Right?
I'm in the market for a new last name, by the way, potentially. So.
Do you think Alex would buy into Hell?
Maybe.
I love that for you guys. Okay, so early digital fonts were bitmaps, which resulted in less than ideal readability at small sizes. And then true type fonts were created in the 1980s, which allowed for computer displays and output devices like printers to use a single font file, which is interesting. They had to use two files before. In 1997, open type fonts were invented, which allowed for both Mac and PC platforms to use a single font file. And this is an incredibly broad overview of fonts in the digital age, but I just wanted to give you guys a taste. If this is something you're more interested in, let me know. I've got tons of references I could send you. In 2009, the Web Open Font Format, WOFF, was developed, and it paved the way for widespread adoption of web fonts in 2011, when all major browsers finally adopted support for WOFF. This revolutionized digital design, allowing designers practically unlimited options in web typography. Fonts are crazy. Fonts are an art. Design is an art. And I feel like there's so much I could talk to you about typefaces in general. Mm-hmm. But I want to end on a very interesting quote. It's an anecdote that I found in an article by Five Forest called The History of Typography, Retracing Letter Forms from Hieroglyphs to Helvetica. This is just an anecdote about what typeface and typeface design used to look like in the late 80s, early 90s, the very early stages of digital fonts. Mm-hmm. I found it incredibly interesting, and it's where we're going to end. It's a longer quote, so stick with me. Quote, "When I started at art college in the 80s, all typography still had to be hand-drawn using type scale rulers, and there was no computer-assisted design at all. I cannot imagine. The Lestrade book contained printed copies of all available typefaces and was a must-have for all graphic design students, mainly used for tracing. At the college, the one CompuGraphic typesetting machine, which created type for printing, was allowed only for your final show work because of the expense of using it. The CompuGraph machine was an analog system for making fonts. It used a photographic method. An image of the font was attached to a carousel mechanism before the light was projected through it onto photographic paper. This was then processed like a photograph using chemical baths. The result was a long strip of text. Each typeface included different fonts: italic, narrow, expanded, upper, lower, emboldened. Each of these had different sizes, from 4.5 to 72 point size. Only a few typefaces were available: a sans serif for headings, such as Helvetica, 2 or 3 body copy typefaces, such as Garamond, Times Roman, Caslon, and then a script typeface for fancy stuff, such as wedding invitations. The tiny availability of fonts was because the typefaces were expensive to buy. Copy was entered via a monochrome visual display unit, screen, and keyboard, but was rarely what you see is what you get. This is, you couldn't actually see on the screen what the font looked like. It was just entered as codes. You wouldn't actually see your text until it was returned to you a day later as a photographic print on a long strip of thick paper. End quote.
Wow, that's crazy. I was definitely born in the right time period because I don't have the patience for that, you know?
Yeah. Imagine if you had to do all of that for a wedding invitation.
I'm only inviting one person to the wedding.
There's no wedding at this point. Yeah. No. I would just call everybody, be like, hey,
Right.
This is it.
You could, you could,
yeah.
but send out carrier pigeons.
Exactly. But then
Handwritten.
you get the handwritten. Yeah. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting anecdote. I was like, damn, that's, first of all, it's crazy that they had to use a book to like be able to copy the fonts, which makes sense.
Right. That just occurred to me. I was like, oh yeah, they weren't even on the computer like when these were being invented. These different fonts.
And not everybody's working off of Not everybody's working off of like a printing press, right? So like, how do the average Joe designer at the time, even like the 70s and 80s, how were they designing posters? Anything?
Tracing,
they were using
that's crazy.
Books and tracing. It's crazy.
Well, I was kind of hoping you'd talk about wingdings, but
oh, I'm sorry, no wingdings. That is one of my favorite typeface. One of the things about Grace and I that I love about the podcast is that we could do the same topic and we would cover very different things about the topic. Like if Grace had done fonts and typefaces, she would have 100% covered wingdings, and like you would have thought about that from the very beginning. It's like, I want to cover that. I didn't even think about it.
Right.
It's just, which is why we make a good team.
We're the perfect team. We each have half a brain, and together, one whole brain.
Hopefully it's one whole brain. Yeah. But yeah, so that's typefaces. I hope you guys learned enough to be annoying at your next party and or design meeting.
That's kind of the whole point of this podcast. I find myself doing that all the time. Like someone was talking about absinthe, and I was like, well, actually, the reason why absinthe was associated with like hallucinating. And there's like
the same thing.
They look at me like I'm crazy. It's like, why do you know all of this? It's like I had to research it for a topic. Like otherwise, there's no way I would know. Have all of it on the top of my head. But
I know. I feel like sometimes like when we're playing video games, like on Discord with our friends, and somebody says something completely innocuous, and I am the most annoying person. I'm like, well, actually, and then I word vomit at everybody for like the next 10 minutes. People are like, oh. And I'm like, sorry, I just had to let you know. That's me. Yeah. That's us.
That's us. We're just obnoxious know-it-alls. But then if you like ask me something, like, this is what I always say about trivia. So I'm like totally useless unless it happens to be like a very specific topic that I know about. And I only know about very random things. I'm not well-rounded in a way that like I'm good at history. But if you ask me like maybe one specific thing in history, I might know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think too, we talk about like, oh yeah, we can word vomit about certain topics that we covered. But there's also things that like I covered that I could not recall to you if you had a gun to my head.
Right.
Do you know
There's
what
definitely
I mean?
certain things that like stick with you more than others, but
yeah.
Well,
but
that's it.
Let us know something
what
sticks with you.
Right. Let us know what topic has stuck with you the most. You can talk to us on Twitter at The Good Eve Girls.
Or Instagram at The Good Evening Girls.
Or TikTok at The Good Eve Girls.
Come on down. And actually, sorry, listeners, but we will not be back next week. I'll be on vacation. It's going to be the 4th of July, Independence Day. So enjoy the time off. And while you do, keep curious. And we will be back again very, very soon. We promise.
Before you know it.
All right, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.